Who is Jeffrey Dahmer? Why is he considered one of the most twisted and insane killers of modern times?
My name is Knox, and I'm going to tell you what this monster did and why he was sentenced to 1,000 years in prison.
But the other prisoners decided to deal with him differently.
What did they do? I'll tell you at the end.
But where did it all begin? Dahmer was born into a very ordinary family in Milwaukee. His parents, Lionel and Joyce Dahmer, were newlyweds, and his mother became pregnant almost immediately after the wedding. The father was just completing his studies at the university. There was no money in the family, but the child was very much expected. After the birth of a son, the family moved to Iowa, where in 1966th year, Lionel defended his doctoral dissertation in chemistry. Soon the guy had a brother, David. Jeffrey's mother was a housewife, and the family lived in an average income. Time mother and father did not waste. At this time, a second son, David, was born, and soon the family moved to Akron, Ohio, where they settled in the suburbs. When Jeffrey was 6 years old, he underwent surgery to correct a bilateral inguinal hernia,
After which he became considerably more erratic and detached. Lionel recalled that at the age of 8, Jeffrey experienced violent behavior from a neighbor.
although Jeffrey himself denied it. His father noticed that the boy's underwear was torn, but it's not clear why he didn't go to the police. Frequent moves as a child prevented Jeffrey from making close friends. The family situation also deteriorated. The strained relationship between his parents led to frequent quarrels, and his mother once had to seek help from a psychiatric clinic for nervous breakdowns.
During his difficult school years, Jeffrey had a loyal friend, a dog named Frisky, over whom he liked to conduct various experiments of a sexual nature, all of which he later described in his biography.
His high school years were overshadowed by the divorce of his parents, which greatly shook him. At the age of 13, he began to feel his peculiarity and soon experienced sexual attraction to one of his peers. At school, Jeffrey was withdrawn and shunned socializing, often consoling himself with alcohol and acting as the class jokester, the kind of badass that people just tried to stay away from. Jeffrey constantly felt competition from his brother, and he felt like he was a little less loved. His brother is the good, normal one, and he is some kind of wrong and embittered one. As you can imagine, the lives of brothers Jeffrey and David diverged. While the younger one was building his life, Jeffrey developed an unusual and sinister attraction to dead animals. He collected their remains, stored body parts in bottles of formaldehyde borrowed from his chemist father, and even set up a kind of graveyard for these animals in the backyard. In parallel, his fantasies became increasingly dark, filled with wild and unrestrained scenes like necrophilia or leisurely dismemberment. But worse was what he then started doing to people.
How did the bloody journey begin? Dahmer admitted that he first killed a man on June 18th, 1978.
Shortly after he graduated from high school and went through his parents' divorce. His mother had left with her youngest son, and his father had temporarily moved into a rented room. Dahmer met a 17-year-old boy named Stephen Hicks, who was hitchhiking, and invited him to his house. There they drank a couple of beers, smoked pot, and when Hicks tried to leave, Dahmer stunned him by hitting him over the head with a steel pancake and then strangled him. He then cut up Hicks's body, put the parts in plastic bags and threw them away in the woods, and wrapped the head in plastic wrap and hid it in a refrigerator. In 1978, Lionel Dahmer married for the second time to a woman named Sherry. The following spring, on his father's advice, Jeffrey decided to join the army. After completing his training as a corpsman, he was sent to serve in Baumholder, Federal Republic of Germany. During his service, he committed sexual offenses against 2 soldiers. In 2010, one of the victims told reporters that he had been abused by Dahmer for 17 months. Another soldier said that Dahmer gave him drugs and raped him in an armored personnel carrier. In 1981, Jeffrey was discharged early from the army due to alcohol abuse and returned home. At his father's request, he moved in with his grandmother in Wisconsin. In the following years, he was arrested twice for indecent exposure. Jeffrey changed jobs frequently until he took a job in a factory that made various chocolate products. On September 15th, 1987, the second murder, committed by Jeffrey Dahmer, took place in a room at the Ambassador Hotel. Having met Stephen Toomey in a gay bar, they had been drinking enough that Dahmer decided to offer to rent a hotel room.
Upon waking up in the morning, Dahmer looked around and noticed Twomey's cold body, with no recollection of the incident.
In a state of shock, He packed the body into a suitcase and ordered a cab to his grandmother. But do you think that was the end of it? Dahmer decided to have a little more fun with the dead guy, or rather his remains. Then he stripped the body more thoroughly and simply stuffed it in the basement. Dahmer also developed a specific approach to finding and luring victims. He often chose his future victims in bars, especially the famous Milwaukee Club 219, where he offered young men money to pose for him. Once the victims were in his home, he would drug them, have sex with them, and kill them. But not just for fun, the guy kept experimenting with parts, perverting them with different orifices and shapes. Most of his victims were homosexuals, and Dahmer dreamed of making his lovers completely obedient. In his horrifying experiments, he even drilled holes in skulls and poured acid into them in an attempt to perform a primitive lobotomy.
While living at his grandmother's house, Dahmer killed 2 more people. On September 25th of that year, he moved in.
And the very next day, he brought a boy from Laos, who had just turned 13, into his new apartment. Dahmer took a series of photographs of the boy, drugged him with alcohol mixed with sleeping pills. Despite a significant dose of drugs, the boy managed to get out and told his parents what had happened. What do you think was done with the perpetrator? Charged and released simply on bail. Pretty rough, huh? When law enforcement began reviewing previous cases involving Jeffrey Dahmer, it became clear that his behavior had already attracted attention on multiple occasions. He had twice been caught engaging in indecent acts, including openly engaging in masturbation, which prompted complaints from those around him. These incidents signaled his problems even then, but were not taken seriously enough. The 3 psychiatrists who evaluated him concluded that Dahmer was suffering from alcoholism and showed no desire for treatment. They noted that his addiction to alcohol made him unable to control his behavior, which only exacerbated his propensity for deviant behavior. At trial, Dahmer admitted taking photographs of the boy, but strongly denied any sexual relationship with him and deliberately putting sleeping pills in his drinks. He insisted that the boy looked much older than his age, which he believed could explain what was happening. Prosecutor Gail Shelton, concerned about the seriousness of the offenses and their potential consequences, demanded a 5-year prison term for Dahmer. However, the judge imposed a lighter sentence of 1 year of probation with the possibility of a day job and 5 years of probation. This sentence was based on the belief that Dahmer could be rehabilitated. However, after only 10 months, he was released, which was later a fatal mistake that allowed him to continue on his murderous path.
Such a short period of time between crimes only spurred Jeffrey Dahmer to new terrible deeds.
Already in February 1999, while under investigation, he committed another murder. His victim was a black homosexual named Anthony Sears. This case showed again that his dark desires could not be suppressed even under the threat of punishment. Dahmer kept Sears' skull and genitals as trophies, a practice that became commonplace for him. Literally at the same time, he killed 4 more people, and early the following year, 3 more. How was it possible to stop Jeffrey? Knox and I'm, the brother of one of Dahmer's earlier victims, escaped from his apartment where they were using together. What I can't get my head around, though, is if your brother was almost raped, where are you going? And what are you waiting for? The boy, who was naked, bloody, and under the influence of drugs, was found on the street by 2 young African-American women. They immediately called the police, but when officers arrived on the scene, Dahmer convinced them it was just an argument between lovers. The police, seeing nothing suspicious, handed Sintasam's phone back to Dahmer, which was a fatal mistake. That same day, Dahmer killed and dismembered the boy. The police even noticed a strange odor coming from the apartment where the body of Tony Hughes, who had been murdered 4 days earlier, was located, but paid no attention to it. When Dahmer was caught red-handed, the police officers who had sent Knox back to the killer were fired, but later reinstated. In the final months of his criminal career, Dahmer killed with appalling regularity about once a week. Between June 30th and July 19th of 1991, he took the lives of 4 more men.
On July 22nd, 1991, Jeffrey Dahmer decided to spend the evening with Tracy Edwards, whom he invited to his apartment.
Everything seemed to be going smoothly until Dahmer pulled out handcuffs and attempted to handcuff his victim. However, Edwards managed to avoid this fate. He broke free from the grip and ran out into the street, where he immediately sought help from a passing police patrol. The officers, interested in the frightened Edwards story, followed him back to Dahmer's apartment. Once inside, they were confronted with an eerie reality they had previously only seen in horror movies. The first thing that caught their eye were the pictures of dismembered bodies. Further inspection of the apartment only aggravated the situation. In the refrigerator were human remains, including several heads, heart, and other organs. In the bathroom, they found a pot with body parts, 2 skulls, and various chemicals such as chloroform and formalin. A cupboard and dressers held jars of male genitals and other body parts. A human skeleton, scalp, and genitalia were found in a closet, and 3 human torsos were floating in a large barrel of acid. Realizing that they had encountered something unimaginably horrific, the police detained Dahmer. Pressed for evidence, he confessed to 17 murders, beginning with the murder of Stephen Hicks in 1978. On July 25th, 1991, he was charged with 4 murders, and bail was set at $1 million.
However, this was not enough. On August 6th, 8 more charges were added, raising the bail amount to $5 million.
By August 22nd, the number of charges had increased to 15. Jeffrey Dahmer's defense was built on the idea that despite the horrific crimes, he was not fully aware or in control of his actions due to a mental condition.
Attorney Gerald Boyle vividly described the details of the crimes and his client's sexual deviations, emphasizing that a mentally healthy person could not have committed something like this.
Psychiatrists on both sides agreed that Dahmer suffered from necrophilia, but could not agree on whether this pathology could have exonerated him. Prosecutor McCann insisted that Dahmer was aware of the criminality of his actions and could control them, both in his daily life and in the course of his carefully planned murders. Thus, he received virtually 1,000 years to life in prison. What happened next? In 1993, as society sought to rid itself of the physical evidence of Jeffrey Dahmer's crimes, a symbolic event occurred: the destruction of the building where his apartment was located. Why was this done? This action was an attempt to erase any reminders of his deeds. That same year, Dahmer, while by his father's side, gave a television interview in which he expressed regret for the suffering inflicted on the families of his victims. However, many doubted the sincerity of his remorse. In the last months of his life, Dahmer faced serious psychological problems, including suicidal thoughts, which required medical intervention.
On July 3, 1994, he was the victim of an attack in a prison church. A Cuban-born inmate attempted to slit his throat using a blade attached to the handle of a toothbrush.
Dahmer survived with only superficial wounds. However, on November 28th of that year, Dahmer was killed by inmate Christopher Scarver while cleaning the shower room. Dahmer, Scarver, and another inmate, Jess Anderson, were left unattended for 20 minutes. In that short time, Scarver used a metal bar or mop handle to inflict fatal injuries on Dahmer and Anderson. Dahmer died en route to the hospital from head injuries, and Anderson died a couple more days later.
This act was not a complete surprise. Scarver had long claimed he was being spoken to from above, and even attempted to fake a mental breakdown.
Some suspected that his actions were motivated by racism, for he openly expressed his dislike of whites, while most of Dahmer's victims were African American. As for Anderson, he was repeatedly accused of trying to shift the blame for his wife's murder onto 2 black men.
When Dahmer died, his body lay in the morgue for almost a year before being cremated in September 1995.
Dahmer's father adamantly refused to donate his son's brain for scientific research, which caused much controversy and discussion in the community. After cremation, Dahmer's ashes were divided between his mother and his father and stepmother. In 1996, attorney Thomas Jacobson, representing the families of 11 of Dahmer's victims, announced plans to hold an auction to sell the serial killer's personal effects. including the ill-fated refrigerator and tools used in the crimes. The auction was expected to bring in as much as $1 million, sparking a wave of outrage among Milwaukee residents. A group of enterprising citizens raised nearly $500,000 to take the items all at once and then simply burn them. Most of the victims' families supported the plan, and it was successfully implemented.
And rightly so. What do you think?
By the way, if you like crazy stories, can write interesting scripts, edit videos or voiceovers, then go to my Telegram. Bot on the link in the description. I will be glad to cooperate. Thanks for watching.